decided they didn't need, you can certainly have, and then you're through the applicant. I think that's what that says. But you can certainly ask them.
I was wondering if like it would go through the conditional approval, like that, in place of actual approval.
It could have been. We can certainly ask that on the. Roll call, please. Yes.
Yes.
Mrs. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Newell?
Yes.
Mr. Piolo?
Present.
Mr. Rowe?
Present.
Anita? Mrs. D'Angelo?
Yes.
Mr. Burkhart and Mr. Leader?
Yes. Okay, so I think where we left off is we're about to move to the professionals to move through the checklist. Did you two decide who's going to start?
Sure, I'll start. So I'm going to look at my most recent planning review letter that's dated December 20th. The applicant had provided a really detailed response to my initial review letter. So I did review, the revised materials. I, comment on some of the changes that occurred between the two sets. And so I'm just going to kind of jump into the planning comments that starts on page 5 of my report. And so my first comment is that the applicant shall confirm that all calculations in the bulk chart are calculated in accordance with borough definitions. Confirmed. And that also includes the building height calculation.
Correct.
Would you mind providing details about each elevation of the corner of the lot and then the
Absolutely.
elevation of the roof? That'd be great.
There's one element for the record.
And then I had a comment about the handicap space located closest to Cedar Avenue and exactly how far that would set back from the proposed lot line after the dedication.
Yeah, we're confirming it's 5 feet. We'll just show the details on there with the dimensions to confirm that.
Okay.
Can I ask where that is? This site is so tight, and I've noticed that coming up. Is that the forward space along Cedar?
Correct. It's, right before where it curves around. The curve cut curves around. I'm not entirely sure what that dimension is there. Just to make sure that piece complies. Yes,
And by comply, you need 5 feet.
correct.
We confirm that it does.
Correct.
Thank you.
And then the applicant did provide testimony tonight, but just to confirm that you will provide electric vehicle charging stations in accordance with the recent law amendments and the DCA model ordinance.
Confirm.
We have a comment about the gate proposed for the trash enclosure. Would you mind using a more decorative gate instead of the chain link with the PVC slats?
We'd be happy to upgrade it, work with you on that.
Okay. And then I just have a comment about providing the specification for the gooseneck light fixtures. There's kind of like a generic drawing included in the architectural plans, but the make, model, and certain specs were included.
We'll provide the cut sheets for that.
Great.
And while you're on that, just so we're clear, Elena, I think there was a comment, unless we're going to cover it again, about the freestanding sign lighting. We're going to provide the same gooseneck lights.
Okay.
Is there a section in one of your reports just about lighting, Rich? Is that in yours?
The only lighting I talk about is the existing lighting on River Road, converting it to LED.
At some point, I'd like to walk around the site and think about where the lighting is. We've had issues. This project abuts an existing residential home. And so I'd like to understand what lights, I don't know when we should do it, but just want somebody make a placeholder, please. Just trying to understand how it's gonna look.
And just to provide testimony to confirm compliance with the window sign ordinance.
We agree to comply.
I do have a comment about providing testimony to address the lighting standards pursuant to the affordable housing ordinance.
I can say on the record that we will comply, and that if you look through the ordinance, I'll go into more detail when we go through the lights based on the chairman's comment. But there's provisions in the ordinance that talk about house shields, illumination levels. There's I think eight prongs or so in under the lighting. There's like 8 prongs that talk about, and we agree to comply with them.
Will comply.
What I want to be sure of, Rich, is that we learn our lessons from the application where we've had problems, recurring problems, and there's things about directions and types of fixtures. And we have one particular side of this project that's going to be the most likely to have a problem.
Usually the way we handle it is the details and all the lighting info is on the plan, and then prior to construction, typically the developer or a contractor will bring their lighting rep out and we'll review the cut sheets to make sure that they do comply, that they're using the latest technology for the cutoffs, what have you. So it's not an after the fact thing, but it's kind of more during construction, pre-construction, and going through the site plan prior to building it. So
Is there a lighting plan? Is there a sheet?
Yeah, it's in the civil set. I don't know what page it's
got all the handles.
It's here. I don't know. Well, your plan. It's not
page 10.
Not the architecture.
Page 9. Sorry, page 9. So
Page 9 is revised. You have it open there?
Yes.
Specifically, what lights are on the exterior of the building on the east side?
We don't have any lights along the perimeter on the east side. Lights are located in the rear, along the office building parcel. And then in the front along River Road, and then under the building, obviously, for the parking itself. But there's a light in the back that's located along the, I guess would be the southern property line, just immediately to the right or to the west of the dumpster enclosure. There's a 15-foot light there, it's just behind the parking.
Sorry, I'm still trying to function.
LL2 as well.
So I'm sorry, could you take us maybe from a corner and just kind of walk around and just describe it generally? As I'm understanding from what Mr. Gardell has explained is that there will be a process of evaluating the individual fixtures, and I defer to that, but I'd like to understand where the placement is specifically with some attention to what the neighboring property owners are going to feel as an impact.
So if we can start in the upper left-hand corner or the southeast corner of the site, as you work your way towards Cedar, you'll see a large letter B that indicates the first key below here. That's where the first light would be located there. It's a B level, a B light, which is down below in the fixture schedule, which just shows a 15-foot light that throws light forward towards River Road or towards our building itself. And if you look at the photometrics that are on the site plan itself, you can see all the pluses and the decimal points. You can see they decrease as they get close to the property line. So if you look to the property, the residential property, you can see where you're getting into 0.1 at the back left corner, 0.2, 0.4 right at the property line. And Rich can confirm, but I believe the code is nothing greater than 0.5 at the property line, which obviously we, I don't want to say we exceed, we comply with.
So these back three are on the poles. Is this these are the poles that we had that were too high that have come down?
They're 15 mounting height.
Are they directional spotlights or are they decorative? What are they?
They're decorative lights, but they also control the light direction. So we can monitor them. And what, as Rich indicated, we've done this on other sites. We go out to the site, even after the site's off, we'll have a light meter out there. And we can make adjustments in the field to make sure that we're not exceeding levels. Or if we have to install house shields or shields on the inside of the glass to make sure it's not reflecting off into somebody else's property, that could cause a problem. That's also something that's done in the field.
Is it generally lit all night or does it go off at a certain time? Or I don't know what the requirements are on you.
So typically what would happen for those back three lights, for example, the middle one would most likely stay on for security purposes. The other two would go off at 10 o'clock at night. And so they would be adjusted to make sure only one stays on. The ones underneath the canopy most likely will be on all the time. Just for people to come in at night when what time to come in. The ones that are underneath the building, which obviously don't have an issue with the neighbors. And then we have the lights that are on River Road, and I'm not sure what, I'm assuming Rich, they're dawn to dusk. If they're street lights.
Yes, they are. They're dawn to dusk, but they're also on a timer, so we have the ability to cut them off like at midnight, whatever the case.
Okay.
So I'm seeing 5 fixtures, the 3 across the rear, the 2 in the garage that are underneath the cantilever.
Right.
And are there any others that are independent of what may be affixed to the building?
No, there'll be wall, what I call wall packs or wall lights above the doors, but they generally are mounted and they just shoot straight down. Nothing to be extended off site.
This is the B fixture type. Thank you.
So you've got a door facing the east. So you've got a light above that door, safety, and then you've got a door facing Cedar.
Yes.
And then is there a door facing the rear as well off of the lobby for the apartment?
I'm not quite right there, I'm sorry.
Is there another door to the rear?
There's a main entrance here off the Cedar. There's a door to the lobby here underneath the parking fixture.
Yeah.
And then you have the 2 doors over here for the stairwell. And then there's doors over here, but one is the sprinkler room The mechanical room, the other one's for the generator. Those will probably have lights over, but small, really not, they're just mechanical rooms. But they're just so you know, also, they're underneath, the residential extends over the top of that. So they're underneath the building itself. So they're recessed underneath. They're located like against the building here, where you have this overhang. So again, they're not out towards the neighbor, they're underneath the building. So be directed down. And again, they're just for the mechanical rooms. So there'll be small lights as opposed to something that might be above the residential entry doors for the stairwells. So you have the one here facing the south underneath the building. This one, I don't know if it really matters, but then you have the one here to get into the lobby, and then you have the one facing Cedar. And then you have obviously the retail doors.
It feels really minimal. And on the front of the building and on the Cedar facing side, you've got other signs that are geared towards the signage. I'm sorry, lights geared towards the signage.
Yeah, we're proposing gooseneck lights on the signage itself. I don't know if you can kind of make them out here. They're in this little AZEC band or this tan band that goes through. There's gooseneck lights that project, or decorative lights that shoot down at the facade signs themselves. Yeah. And so there's one on Cedar, and then we're showing 3 again, depending on the tenant mix. We're showing 3 facade signs, and those facade signs will comply with your signage ordinance.
And they're not to be backlit, right? They're just going to be lit by those fixtures.
Correct. And that's the cut sheet that Elena was referring to, providing us with more detail. We show it gooseneck pictorially, if you will, but we don't have the cut sheet on it with all the details.
So there's no, not only a cut sheet, there's no lighting detail.
Now, it's on the architectural plan. She's asking for the cut sheet to give more detail on that, just as opposed to just pictorially showing the gooseneck.
And we'll supply that.
Yes, and also the freestanding sign, which is located on the corner. The question came up whether that would be internally lit, downlit, uplit. That will have the same gooseneck lights. So again, the lights on the freestanding sign will be projected from the top, right at the sign, no spillage outward, if you will.
The applicant has no objection to supplying that information, conferring with the engineer prior to placement, following that direction, working out any issues that you have.
That's correct.
Correct.
Thank you for allowing me to hijack that and do a little lighting.
That's prerogative.
All right, back to you. Thank you.
My next comment is you can provide testimony about any kind of potential future interconnections to adjacent sites.
We don't anticipate any.
I think in the ordinance there's might be a design standard about something having to do with the interconnection of sites, since I believe it's adjacent to
From driveway or from pedestrian?
Either or.
Because obviously, sidewalk or pedestrian, we should comply with the sidewalk put on both road frontages, but we're not proposing any roadway connection. And at one point, we looked at acquiring property to the south for one successful. Also, the property to the south, we have a proposed retaining wall that runs along from the upper left or the southeast corner along there. So from a grade standpoint, the only potential area would be immediately adjacent to Cedar Avenue. I'm not sure if that would work with the driveway that's located on the property to the south.
Understood. Okay, so does anybody have any other comments?
Did you address the fencing around the trash enclosure?
Yeah.
Yes.
The gate? Yes.
I'm sorry, and the
No,
answer was?
I was just commenting on about the future interconnections because of the retaining wall. It would be difficult, if possible, to connect to that site. Okay, and so I have a.
In response to council's question.
I understood the,
Oh.
You said if there were any other questions, you were on that topic.
Yes.
Jumped ahead, sorry.
Sure. My next comment is, could you provide some testimony about how snow removal will be handled
Yeah,
Where
so-
would you anticipate putting that snow?
Understood. So a site, we own and maintain all of our rental property, both commercial, we've never sold an income producing property. So we own and manage that. A site like this, we'd actually remove the snow from the site itself. We would come onto the site either with a rubber tire backhoe or depending on the amount of snow, if it's a small front end loader, and load the snow into a dump truck and take it off site. There's no place on here to place the snow. And we do that. That's typical for a lot of our residential and commercial shopping centers where there's just no room to pile snow.
Okay, great. And then I just have a comment about deferring to the board engineer about stormwater management, utilities, and satisfaction with the requirements of the borough's active transportation plan. So we're going to go into the architectural comments that I have here. I believe you already did, but you did provide testimony confirming the materials for the building.
Correct.
And you provided testimony clarifying the colors proposed for the structure.
Correct.
And that the anticipated colors and materials will match the colorized renderings of the structure.
As close as possible. It's the intent, obviously, something that you plot on a color plotter may be different than the actual color, but if we're going for the earth tone, tan color for the siding, that's what we're going to be shooting for.
But what we do know is we know that we have a stone veneer, we know we have party board, we know we have AZAC,
Correct.
Metal awnings.
metal awnings.
Metal balcony.
All right.
Yeah, aluminum
Yeah,
frames for the balcony and the doors and windows. Again, what we're proposing as materials is not changing. I'm just stipulating that I just don't want somebody holding up this color drawing to a sample in the field and say, hey, wait a second, you said it was going to be this tan and it's slightly different just by the way the things are color plotted.
No, that's fair.
Then I have a comment about whether the facade facing Cedar Avenue meets the glazing provisions in the ordinance. Specifically that 60% of the ground floor facade is required to be glazed and 20% of the upper story facade is required to be glazed.
So two things on that, and we will agree to comply and provide those calculations. I know they're not on the drawing, which is why you're asking, but we agree to comply with the 60 and 20%.
The 60
And 20.
And 20%.
and 20% along for the Cedar Avenue facade.
Correct.
Do you know how you would address that, or would you add more windows, or?
Well, one thing that we were talking about was, I know there was a concern about, I hate to call it a blank wall, which is really a small section where the elevator shaft is.
Right.
And that's located in this area here. We talked about putting what we refer to as fake windows or transom type windows where it's actually not a physical window, but it gives you appearance from the outside of a window. So from the outside, it looks like a window, but obviously you can't put a window in an elevator shaft. And that's how we would propose to address two of your comments, one about the glazing and the second one about the blank wall, if you will, in that area.
Are there any other features? This was a bigger issue before, and it's still, the building's very nice, please don't get me wrong, but it does still strike me that the Cedar front is a real front. People will see this every day, perhaps even more than they see it from River because they're driving by, and in Cedar, you're actually slowing down, you're turning, and you're really looking at it. It would be nice to get that cleaned up some to make it nicer. I mean, for that matter, had you considered extending the, what you call it, the cornice? Thank you. Should have written it down.
Yeah, I think actually it's a little bit further down in the letter where the planner is asking us to
Number 15.
extend the treatment that we have on River, extending around Cedar.
I didn't mean to skip ahead, I'm sorry.
Not a problem. So then my next comment is just about the window along Cedar Avenue on the first floor. Can you just confirm that the sill height is not more than 30 inches?
It will not be.
Okay. So you will comply
Yes.
with all the windows, even the ones that you were, the fake ones or
Correct.
whatnot that you would be adding. Okay. And then comment 15. I have asked the applicant provide testimony pertaining to whether or not the Cedar Avenue facade is designed as a front facade, and whether to provide testimony regarding the horizontal feature that was added to the plans specifically the material and the color of that feature.
Yeah, I'm not exactly, I don't think it's possible.
I think it's that like white line between the third and second floor. Yeah, I don't think there's a call out on the plan.
That's an AZAC trim.
That's the exact trim.
Yeah. It's not pulled out, it's an AZAC trim.
Okay.
That matches the rest. You don't know what it is.
That's true.
And then I also question if the applicant has considered adding additional architectural features to the facade similar to what appears on River Road.
And again, that's what the chairman, I think, was going with that. We agree to, again, work with your professionals to carry the facade. We understand the importance of the facade on Cedar, to carry the elevations that we did on River around the corner to have the same treatment. So whether it's breaking up the parapet or corners on the top to, again, continue it so you don't have, again, maybe there's a situation where you introduce this same decorative back in here to break it up. You don't just go with the flat roof here. Also continue around some breakups in the brick here. Again, we can work with your professionals or the board to make that a true frontage.
So help me understand the height, because it's on a picture right now. You haven't heard from the residents yet, but you will. And I know that there's concern about the size of the structure. We haven't really talked about a lot of that, but help me understand how the height of the cornice is set. I recognize that having that deviation provides a lot of appeal, but is there a reason that it is as high? Like if you were to pull it down, do you lose function? If you similarly pulled the center sections down, could you get the same effect and be at 37?
You do get the same effect. The difference would be as it relates to any mechanical units. Okay, so a building, first off, has retail commercial in it, so it's going to be condensers. They have to be somewhere. They either have to be on the ground or on the roof, as opposed to the residential units, which have what we refer to as wall packs in the units themselves. So there is no condenser, so you're not going to have 14 condensers outside the building. For the residential units, they're within the individual units themselves. So the residential is not an issue. You do have condensers for the residential, typically one, maybe two for common areas.
Commercial.
Oh, no, for the residential, for the common areas, for the hallways, stairwells, stuff like that, stuff that has to be a conditioned space. Obviously, you don't have a wall pack because you don't have the access to it. So you have a condenser for that. And then obviously you have the condensers for the retail / commercial, which is located on the roof. The reason for the parapet is so that when you put the condensing units in the middle of the roof, you don't see them from the street here. The parapet, because of the depth of the building, the way the parapet is set up, those condensers are located behind it, and by visual, you won't be able to see them. Now, to your point, Mr. Chairman, can I lower by 6 inches or a foot and maybe still achieve the same visual? Because if you're standing across the street, if you have a building 35 feet high, you're not gonna be able to see the condensers anyway, because once you get to a certain point, you're just gonna see sky. Probably could. I could take a look at that and see if it works with professionals, but that's the whole purpose of that, is to break up the roof line as well as give the ability to hide any mechanicals that may be up there.
So you also have the ability to move it back, right? So the closer the RTU.
Oh, yes.
So if the RTU were literally right up against the front facade of the building, you're more likely to see it from River. If you put it back 10 feet, your eye can't get around and see it, right? So when we developed this ordinance, we developed the height around the need to create a viable commercial space and 2 viable levels of residential. And so, truth be told, you've taken at least some of that and used it as an architectural feature to hide mechanicals, which is important. However, you are 3 feet taller than what would otherwise be permitted within the zone. And so if it is possible, don't get me wrong, because of the overlays, the way that we did it, it was all by design. It was intentional so that you could have a successful project and we could make it all work. But what I'm seeing is that you've used it to make something nice, beautiful. However, it's still going to be big. And so if it were possible to pull that down a foot, to get that condenser back, it would have a material impact in how this building felt over time when it gets dropped onto this site. If that were possible, I think that it would be a really good thing to do.
And based on based on what you're telling me, the depth of the building, we would typically put the condensers in the center of the roof anyway. I don't think it makes a difference. I think we could lower it by that foot easily. If that's a, it's a concern, obviously, of the borough and the board, we understand that. And it doesn't do anything for me, as far as the building. I mean, doesn't make a difference to me whether it's 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot. It's really just there for an architectural feature and to hide the.
And at the end of the day, the reason the space is there is so that you have it, so that you can make a successful project. But if you don't actually need it, and you can forego some of it, I know it would be a plus.
Understood.
HVAC.
Can you just provide some testimony about how the residential units are going to be, have heating and cooling? We need a comment just now about those using not having
Don't
condensers.
let go of that point. Exactly.
Yes. So HVAC's come a long way. Years ago, you used to have a balcony in order to have a utility room out there. And the utility room had to be vented and aired. What we're able to do here is provide internal HVAC units inside the building itself that are vented through the roof itself. So they don't have to be on the exterior. So when I say a wall unit, please don't confuse it with a window unit air conditioner. These are self-contained units themselves.
So a question was asked at the dais with regard to what may be on the roof beyond the RTUs. Do we have anything related to the apparatus required for the elevator? Are there any other things that need to be obscured?
The elevator shaft, the stairwell may protrude slightly, and then just mechanicals. When I say mechanicals, there's going to be obviously a vent, but just an exterior vent for like the commercial pieces themselves if they have a kitchen. So those are built into the architectural to have a shaft all the way up through the residential to get up to the roof for venting purposes. Other than that, no.
So we won't see it.
Correct. And also just so for the record itself, and that's by design. So, the retailers, obviously the easy way would have been just put the vents out the back into where the parking area is. But obviously we ran them all the way up through the roof to get them out of the way and not at the first, not going to be visible because they're under the parking, but not put them in a space where they're blowing air, if you will, to direct to the public. They just go up through the roof. So they go through a closet or a chase in the residential units, they go up to the roof.
I believe we provided the testimony about adding additional architectural features to the Cedar Avenue facade, and also to incorporate some kind of windows or something into the elevator stairwell area along Cedar Avenue. And then I believe you just also did provide testimony about revising the roof line along Cedar Avenue.
Correct.
Because right now, as proposed, it's just kind of mismatched. There's like 3 different things going on. So if it could, put something together that would, make it more like a front, that would be ideal. And so then I just have a comment about the applicant providing testimony regarding the balcony requirements and utilities requirements in the ordinance to confirm compliance.
Sure. Again, going through the ordinance where it requires restrictions in the lease, we agree to comply with what's in the ordinance for both those stipulations, and it's to our best interest as well.
And then I just recommend that the applicant submit a roof plan showing the location of mechanical equipment. In addition, are you proposing any kind of rooftop amenities?
No.
Maybe trampoline.
Sorry, a question on the balconies on the second floor apartments. Will they be able to, will the residents be able to walk, from, there seems to be defined balcony areas on, if I look on page 2 maybe?
There's a railing all the way around the balcony.
Yes, but can they walk over the retail area, like all the way around the corner? Okay, so that's blocked.
They have railing on 3 sides.
Got it, okay, thanks.
That is a flat roof though, the retail area is all flat roof.
Correct.
So I'm not saying that you designed it probably, but they can hop over the railing and run around the roof if they want.
They could.
Okay.
The balconies are accessible to the residents.
Yes. Well, to the units that have them.
Only the 6. Yeah.
There's only 6 balconies, so there's only 3 units per floor that have the balconies. They're the only people who can use that back with house.
So the entire first floor second floor can't get out, only the ones with specific documents.
Well, there's only 3 units in the front, so all 3 units would have it in the front. Not the units in the back don't have anything.
I'm sorry, so the balconies are on the 3rd floor. Those would be access to the areas that are surrounded by the railing.
And the second and third floor.
So the 2nd floor underneath, but only those areas immediately beneath that. So that's the issue of above the commercial is everything in between.
Yeah, I think the question was, and I'm sitting down here, whether somebody in this unit has access to walk along this entire flat roof. And the answer I said was, if you look at the way we have the 3rd, you don't see it because of the parapet that's here to hide it. They would have railings on all 3 sides. So this unit is limited to the space underneath this covering. He can't walk out to this flat roof. The one board members, yes, they can hop the railing and walk around there, they can. But it's intimidated to be just meant to be just for that unit itself.
So Paul, we go slow them up.
Okay, so next, permit number 17 talks about the number of storefronts proposed in the building. I believe you provided testimony this would be a maximum of 3
Correct.
units. And then I just have some comments about whether or not you know who the tenants are for the storefronts.
We do not.
At this time, not yet. And then for the residential, are you proposing to have like a full-time employee on site?
No.
To kind of manage the lobby or anything?
No. There'll be staff, cleaning people who come daily, staff members available, but this size building will not have a full-time person there.
And that's all for my report.
Everything from your original October report was addressed?
I believe so, with the exception, I think I, commented in my revised report on just kind of run through the summary of the changes. I know between the concept plan and the proposed site plan, there were some changes with the landscaping and the trees in the rear yard. Can you provide some testimony about the overall landscaping of the site?
And again, I always get bogged down by a concept plan when everything's put forward in an initial settlement agreement, no matter where I'm at, because it's just that, it's just a concept plan. Once you go to a full design, I got retaining walls, I got grading to deal with. You get more into the car overhangs. So the pretty picture, if you will, that goes with the concept plan now gets more defined as to what you can actually fit out there. We have our internal landscape division look at it. They're looking at certain plant species that are not only the ones that are permitted in town, but what works best for us from a management standpoint, what species survive best adjacent to each other, in the sun, in the shade. As engineers, most of the time, I always joke with my guys, they just put symbols on a plan, where we actually have our landscape division look at it because they're the ones that are going to be maintaining it. And that is how we come up and formulate our landscaping plan, which is one of the reasons where I have to put a waiver from the landscape architect, because we put so much detail into it. And the waiver from the landscape architect is simply, it's simply that waiver. If the board or the professionals felt that absolutely had to be signed and sealed by a landscape architect, obviously we agree to comply. We don't think it's necessary in a small site, but that's the level of detail we go into on all of our plans as to what landscaping is put where and what species and everything.
And we work with them to make sure it's consistent with that way.
Correct.
Okay. Will the landscaping proposed on the site be irrigated?
Yes.
Question, as you brought up the landscaping, you have a team addressing that. Is the team also looking at the trees on the property line to the east between the residents? There are some shade trees on that property that seem healthy. I know that there's branches that overhang the lot that would likely be impacted by a 3-story build. Is your team looking at that at all, ways to protect those trees?
Yeah, we would actually go out on site, obviously part of the pre-con meeting, go out there and be able to flag with the engineer which trees may need to be trimmed or pruned back. It's not a simple matter. Obviously, we can't take the trees down. Most of them are not on our property, but obviously we have to be able to prune whatever is necessary. it becomes a benefit for everybody. Obviously, you're not going to do anything to jeopardize the tree itself as far as life, but obviously from a maintenance standpoint, of what happens on our building if it's getting too close. So that's something that we typically work out in the field as to, okay, this tree, we can trim these branches here and prune this and prune that so that there's survivability with the trees that are out there. It doesn't benefit anybody for us to go out there and do something that's going to harm the tree, especially after the building's built. Now I got to try to get in there, and if there's a problem, take it down. So that's something we typically do in our field with our landscape professional, in-house landscape professionals. So again, are going to be maintaining the site now.
And as you mentioned, since they're not on your property, will you work with the town, the tree expert, in order to kind of come up with some sort of protection plan for the trees?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I'm not sure if Fairhaven has an arborist or if we just work with the engineer, but certainly that'd be something that we would comply with as to if they had somebody or if they wanted us to have somebody out there who's a certified tree arborist on site during this to make sure that we were doing it in accordance with best practices for tree management, if you will.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I mean, we're speaking about landscaping, we really haven't spent any time with that. Elena, did you go through that in greater detail? Did you want to lead us through, or?
I just have another comment that I kind of noticed in reviewing the landscaping plan is that the label that showed the number of arborvitae didn't match the number of arborvitae actually shown on the plan.
Right.
Just to kind of, provide some testimony to clarify that inconsistency. I believe it was in the area along the side property line.
Yeah, it was on the southern line. Yeah, we looked at that, and obviously there's an error in the chart that would have to be updated.
Okay.
So what's on the plan is accurate.
Correct.
Chart is a typo.
Correct.
So can we just kind of walk around? I realize that the overall landscape plan, I guess, is going to remain open and then would be signed off on at some point in the future. Is that the idea? Or do you know?
What do you, I'm misunderstood.
So you're asking for the waiver with regard to the sign off on the landscape plan by a landscape architect?
No, the waiver is that we provide a certified landscape architect sign our plans.
But does that indicate that there's any openness with regard to what you propose to plant, remove, and how you intend to design it? Or do you know what you're going to do on site?
Based on our internal tree experts, we know what we want to do on the site. It's just simply a waiver from having a landscape architect just certify the plan on our behalf. Again, if the borough felt that was, if we want to see it, if we have concerns about the neighbors, we have concerns about what you're proposing, and I don't want to disrespect anybody sitting at the table. We're not tree experts, let somebody else who does it. If you want that certified by landscape architect, we can certainly provide that.
That's not my focus. My focus is to talk about it. So
Okay.
Can we take a corner and walk the site, and can you tell us what you're putting in so that board members understand and have an opportunity to think it through?
I can do my best. I'm not an arborist either, but I can do my best to walk you through it. Again, there's certain requirements in the ordinance that talk about what shade trees, deciduous trees we have to put, whatever green trees, and then obviously the shrubs. So if you look, along the back property line itself, you obviously have the larger, the red maple trees that are along the perimeter itself, and then those are flanked by a series of pine or evergreen trees and shrubs along the entire frontage to provide really a physical barrier, if you will, between us and the property. Specifically because we have the headlights, even though there's parking lot behind us, we have the headlights there. So between the low growing shrubs, the evergreens, and obviously the bigger deciduous trees, we'll provide that barrier. And then we'll continue that around.
I'm sorry, but before you move on.
No worries.
You got what you need done? I'm sorry. You got what you need? No. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So on the back, I think this is all new, right? There's nothing there that you're saving that's on site.
Correct.
Okay, so you're putting in 6 trees across the rear, and then you're planting shrubs that are high enough that from day one on planting, they will obstruct the headlights heading to the south.
Correct.
And that's going to go from property boundary to property boundary effectively, right?
From the dumpster to Cedar Avenue, correct.
All the way. Okay, I'm sorry. And you were headed in a direction from there.
So let's continue in that direction around Cedar Avenue. In the corner of Cedar where our driveway is, we have again a series of evergreen trees, 8 to 10 foot evergreens that are located in that corner itself, as well as the low growing shrubbery in the corner itself. So again, that corner is visibly blocked, if you will, from Cedar Avenue. And then as you come across the driveway, as you work your way towards River Road, we have a series of rain gardens that are located for stormwater design in those areas there itself. And those are complemented with low growing vegetation. And then you have obviously the two larger deciduous trees that are located along Cedar within those rain gardens or bioretention swales, whatever you want to call them these days. And that wraps around a corner. And then you get around the frontage itself along River Road. And then you can see a series of low-growing shrubs and potted plants along there, again, to give a visible decorative look along River Road, not to take away from the two large red maples that are located, the larger trees that are on River Road itself. And then you work your way around the one-way drive aisle, and again, you have a series of shrubs and pine trees or evergreens that flank the building itself on the right-hand side or the western side of the drive aisle as you work your way back towards where the dumpster is itself.
Is this a fence, the red car coming in? I'm sorry, I'm looking at what you handed us the first time, the initial sheet. Coming in that drive aisle, is that a fence between the property owners?
On the left-hand side, there's a residential.
Yes.
There's a retaining wall there with a fence on it. Yes.
Is there a grade change there?
There's starts off about 1.5 foot retaining wall, the closest yard to River Road. Goes up to about a 3 foot retaining wall in the middle, and then it tapers back down as you get down back behind the dumpster enclosure itself there. So it's a lower retaining wall. Like I said, starts off about 18 inches and it works its way up to 3 feet in the dumpster enclosure.
Is there any change in grade in that location? Or is that the existing grade that you're just putting a wall into hold?
Yeah, there's a change in grade there. The issue is now we have the drive aisle, so in order to make up that grade, we have to put the retaining wall in there. So there's a drop between the properties, except now, if you look at the aerial. Never mind. Because it's under tree coverage. So you have the existing parking lot today sits probably 8 or 10 feet off the property line. We're moving that drive aisle closer. So if we make up that grade somehow, we're doing it by retaining wall. Because obviously we can't change the grading on the neighbor's property.
Okay, so there's really no planting on this side. So the idea is that those trees, you're mindful of those trees. You're going to trim those trees as you need to in some conscientious way with the cooperation of the neighbor, I assume.
Right.
And then you're putting a retaining wall here with a fence on top of it.
6 foot solid white fence.
Privacy fence.
Correct.
That'll come all the way to where the retail kind of stops, but then nothing further towards River Road.
We at that point, if you look where the retaining wall stops, it's hard to see on the plan, but at that point, we're dropping the fence down to a 42 inch, because that's what's required in the front yard.
Sure.
And that's continuing up to about maybe 10 or 15 feet from the property line. So we're continuing a fence along, which is dropping from the 6 foot down to 42 inches, because that's what's required in the code in the front yard. And then once we get to a point, it's about 10 or 12 feet back from the property line, we get into site triangle for the neighbor, not for us.
Yeah.
We have to stop the fence.
And the layout of the patio and the landscape area across the Cedar and the River Road frontage, this is about you're building this.
Correct.
And is there area for outdoor dining as part of the design?
That's what the entire paved area, paver area, if you will, along the front is intended for outdoor dining. If we have a tenant to accommodate it, correct.
What are the dimensions of that?
It's about 9 feet deep from where the landscaping is back to the building itself. And then obviously the length of the building, but the site plan shows a building.
So I don't want to go too far with overthinking how this is going to lay out. But as it sets up, you have an access point from the east side, an access point 2 access points before you get to Cedar, but nothing in the middle.
Correct.
But your doors that you show for the retail, are those the awning shown on this overhead?
Correct. The dash line? Oh, I don't know which one you're looking at, I'm sorry.
The dark, I don't know, Doug, what is this exhibit?
That's 828.
That's all. So outdoor dining is obviously, you know, super important these days for any restaurant user. And I want this space to be useful in that way. But as I'm understanding your access points around this landscaping, you're getting up onto that patio area and then you're walking east-west to then get to the entrance and then going in. Would it make sense to have an entrance that's directly in front of your door so that the other patio areas can just be tables and you don't have traffic going along River Road?
There's a retaining wall, there's a grading issue there. So there's a retaining wall along the front that separates the sidewalk along River with that landscape bed, which is why you have the 2 cut-throughs, if you will, or entries on that straddle it, one on the left side or you know, the western eastern side and one towards Cedar. So there's a retaining wall there that it's only a foot high, but it's still a grade change and we can't provide the access from sidewalk on River. So that's why we have the access point closest to the one-way driveway in, and then as you work your way down towards Cedar, there's another access point there. That's where the grade. But the retaining wall starts off at 4 inches high, goes down, it's just under a foot. Then it's 9 inches, and then it works as you're working your way down River Road towards the residential house. It goes back down at the corner. It's about a foot, just over a foot in that corner. So there's a grade issue there. We can't have that direct connection. I mean, I guess we could probably put in steps, but we have to deal with ADA. They'd have to go all the way down to the corner of Cedar anyway.
So I can understand a grading issue when you move to the east, because the property owners is set as to elevation, and you're coming across and you need to maintain some level. But why is there a grading issue to River?
So right at this point here in the center, there's a great difference between the sidewalk here and our patio. So we have a small retaining wall that starts about here, that runs along here and then wraps around. This is where you have to cut through here. So there's a retaining wall here because there's about a little over a foot drop here. So we couldn't provide the access here. So we have the access down here and the access here because you have this retaining wall here that makes up the grade difference.
But
because the patio is flat, the road is changing, but the patio is flat. So
that's not something you can just level out and not have that step and just be directly accessible from the sidewalk?
The problem is when you have a building like this where you're maintaining a flat floor, and the grade on the road is changing, but I have a flat floor.
Yeah.
So someplace I have to find a happy medium.
Yeah.
If it's flat here and matches the grade, and let's say it's at elevation 100, yeah, and then here it starts at 100, but then here it drops to 99, I'm a foot below the finished floor. But my patio needs to be flat to get into my storage for ADA. So I have no choice but to put this small retaining wall in to make up that difference.
Okay. You've explained it to me in a way that I can understand. And I thank you for dragging me through it. I still think it makes sense. Just think about it in your head. If you walk from that sidewalk, even if you went up a step, I don't know what your ADA requirements are, and went directly into the retail space, and the left and the right patio could be walkway, where now you've got a space for tables and no one's walking around you. It just seems to me to lay out that way. Maybe it doesn't work.
No, to your point, we have the ADA access over here. That's why I said earlier, I could punch through here and have a step, maybe a step or two, maybe probably just one step in here. If that was something that you thought, and I agree with you, if you want to get to this middle tenant, if I have 3 tenants, and I have my middle tenant here, and I have somebody sitting down here that I really want people walking in front of their table and everything to get to this space. I get it. We could do that with a step.
I don't think it's anything that I just want you to understand the idea, just so you've got it.
No, it makes sense.
There were a lot of ideas that we put together that are on this sheet. That's just something I'm seeing. I want to make sure you saw it on.
Thank you.
All right, so we walked the landscaping. Get through your letter?
Yeah, I just have another comment that was a carrier of my previous letter about bicycle parking and storage. I think you're providing a bicycle rack on the plan. Are you providing any additional bicycle parking for residential units outside of the actual units?
No.
I thought we decided there would be something.
There is, I believe they are providing one bike rack, S-shaped bike rack.
Right.
Or a wave shape, I guess is the appropriate.
The units themselves, there's no separate bike lane for tenants or a separate space in the units themselves, short of, you know, a closet or whatever they have in there. Which is, I think, why the borough was so insistent on some of the restrictions on the balconies, for that exact reason. They don't end up out there.
So the proposed bicycle rack, though, how many bikes is it anticipated could be stored there?
I think the current one we're showing is 6 to 8 bikes. But again, if we felt that with 14 units, if we need a second rack, it's not the end of the world to put a second rack in.
Would the racks be just used for residential, or would it be
No.
for even whoever first come first serve?
Correct.
Yeah, bike rack is something to consider in a town like Fairhaven where our kids bike to school. If one of your retail tenants becomes like a lunch spot, you might have a whole crew of school kids going there on their bikes. So it might be something to consider to add more.
Yeah, so I said maybe a second or third rack would make sense.
Yeah.
And again, it's something as as you know, as being the owner and maintaining this, it's something that we would monitor depending on who the tenants are. If you get a bagel place or a small deli, that might lend itself to that. It's not going to be long before there's too many bikes laying on the ground before we go install a bike rack.
Got it, yeah.
Right.
And then I just had one last comment. I'm not sure if you addressed it or not. What is the frequency of the trash and recycling pickup?
It's really done as needed. It's really hard to tell. Depends on who your retailers are. If I get a small office user in there with little or no traffic, trash versus a retail tenant, it doesn't change the size of the enclosure. It just depends on the frequency. So typically we start off on a Monday and like a Thursday, because the weekends usually get heavy trash for the residential. But depending on who the retail tenants are, it's monitored because we monitor ourselves. If it has to be 3 times a week, it has to be 3 times a week.
Okay. And I believe that's all of my comments for now.
So when I looked at the memorandum that you put together with regard to the settlement agreement, there were a number of things that I flagged. I just want to make sure that we have an opportunity to talk about them. One of them relates to the awning itself, and specifically the one at the corner of the building. And so, but I just wanted to reflect on what you decided, because originally, as part of the settlement, there had not been a commitment, but the architectural shows something that's very stylish. Can you explain to us what it is, where there will be words on it, if there will be any words on it, and how it works?
So again, when we first started the conversations, I know that the corner treatment was a big point of discussion, you know, where there was going to happen with the corner element. And at one point we had a tower element, we had all kinds of features going on in the corner. We got to the point where we understand the importance of that visual impact on it, which is why we put the chamfer, the corner thing on it. There's no intention to have any signage on that chamfer piece of it, or the bend, if you will. We do show signage along the doors on Cedar Avenue. It's hard to see from the one elevation. You see it from the upper left elevation where you show a facade sign, you know, above the entry here. And then we just have these metal awnings. And the only reason it's on the corner really is just to carry over to wrap it around the corner, because we're providing the metal awnings on all of the storefronts here, and including where there's not doors. And we just want to carry it around the corner because we have it again over here on this door. And we have another feature with the same metal type canopy over the residential entry. So it just made sense to add it on that corner feature, to just carry that element all the way around the corner.
What are the dimensions of the awnings? How far do they project?
There's no scale on here, but it looks like about 3 feet with the awning is on there.
I did scale it on the site plans when I was reviewing it. It does comply with the ordinance.
We put a maximum on it.
I believe so. I don't believe they're allowed to project awning shall have a metal structure covered with canvas, metal, or like product. Awnings may have a front skirt. The bottom of the skirt shall not be scalloped. Maximum of 3 feet from the exterior wall into the front yard setback, and a height of at least 8 feet above the sidewalk grade.
And they have to all be consistent.
Correct. If one storefront has one, all have to have them. You're not allowed to have a sign on an awning either.
No sign. With regard to the sign, I read, I think, Elena, was it you or Rich's review that there's no lettering in excess of 10 inches, is that right?
That sounds correct to me.
Does that sound right?
That was the comment, I believe they agreed to.
Yeah, I think I agree that the sign would comply with the ordinance.
I'm
I
gonna
don't
ask
remember
this,
off the top of my head what that dimension was.
I'm gonna ask this question, it's not as loaded as it sounds. How big are the letters on Duncan? You don't remember it? Just way too big. The ordinance that we have, we established that 10 inches as the maximum. That's part of what we did.
Yes.
Is that consistent with the general sign ordinance, or did we tighten it up? I don't remember.
I believe we tightened it up for this application, for this property.
And not that backlit, is that part that's
No internal.
no internal.
No internal. They're going to be lit from the gooseneck. They'll be lit
Correct.
from the front back to the building.
Direct it down from the front, correct.
Okay. Elena, there was a comment with regard to the rear yard setback, which in your memo was referenced as 18 feet, but that just didn't seem like that could be right. You've noted that it's setback 18.9. Is that a? I'm looking at October 27, right?
Which in your page number?
Yeah, page 5.
Page 5. Okay.
Item 6 under A, bulk standards.
Correct. So it's setback 18.9 feet from the rear yard setback, where it's the minimum is 18 feet and it's setback 18.9 feet.
But where is the building 18.9 from the rear?
I believe it's from that corner across the drive aisle.
I think
At
what's
that
happening here is
point.
we have 2 rears.
Second rear, you're talking about the easterly side.
Correct.
Thank you.
Right.
And that 50-foot, that 50-foot number that's calling out as a side is not a side. That's the, well, sorry, it's technically a side, but that's to the south.
Right. So the 50.3 is across the parking lot
Yes.
to where the building cantilever, there's the tandem spaces,
Yeah.
and then the side is technically where the one-way drive aisle goes into the site. That's correct. That's the rear. It's backwards because of the minimum, the smaller side of the lot on the corner. A lot is the rear yard.
Thanks.
Mhm.
The floor area ratio. So you flagged originally, I guess the floor area ratio limitation is 0.95. You indicated that it eventually looked like it might have gone up to, oh, it was 0.92. Where is it today?
Today, it is, they did revise, there's some inconsistencies on the first set of plans where the total habitable floor area didn't match up to the habitable floor area ratio. And so they have since revised their plans to conform. So today, their habitable floor area is
I think it's in your report. It's
0.92.
0.92. So they're below the maximum on 0.95.
Why did the size of the building change overall? It all tightened up. And you didn't maximize what you were entitled to do. What was the cause of that?
There was, I think, when you work your way through the ordinance, between the setbacks, the step backs, and just everything, you're right, we could have went another couple of thousand or another couple hundred square feet to get to the 0.95. But to Elaine's point, there was an inconsistency on there. When we reduced the building, that's why the units overall ended up getting a little smaller each, was the building got pulled in by virtue of the front yard setback. There was an issue with, I think, Deed dedication along Cedar Avenue that the city is looking, the borough is looking for. That forced us to move the building back further away from Cedar because we have to provide the dedication. There was a dedication along River Road that pushed the building back again. So all those things combined end up shrinking our building envelope, if you will, and that's what reduced everything.
Okay, thanks. The wall signs we talked about, the freestanding sign, we haven't talked about that. Is there one? There is.
Yes,
one.
it's on
There is one?
page 4.
So I'm still looking at this.
Okay.
And this is what I'm stuck with.
Okay, well, the details on page 4, there's the freestanding sign is located on the eastern side of the property. In this general grass area here. It's really, I call it a monument sign because it's only 8 foot tall. And then 8 foot, 8.
That's pretty tall.
So this was an issue that we discussed a lot. And so, you know, the thought at the time from this side was that it's not going to help you. That at the end of the day, the people that are going to be coming to these locations are going to know that they're there. You're not going to get people driving by and saying, oh, there's a whatever here. I suppose it could happen once. Recognizing that tenants like more signs. You know, we had a lot of issues with regard to the freestanding sign at the Acme, for example. And so if you observe it, what you'll see is that the sign's elevated so that when cars actually go to exit, they can look to the east and they can see underneath the sign because there's a lot of activity there. You're going to have something very similar here. What is the design of this sign? It's 8 feet tall. Does it go all the way to the ground?
It does. Keep in mind, it's at a location where there is no sight triangle because the cars are entering the site from River Road. So you don't have that issue you had at Acme where they have to be able to see underneath it.
They're not coming out.
Yeah.
Can I ask what you're advertising on the sign? Just the 3 retail?
And the residential.
Yeah.
Whether it's the edge of Fairhaven or wherever name you come up with so that visitors can locate the building itself.
Do you need an 8 foot sign to show that much information for retail and?
Again, I think the way we have it on here is on the top would be the name of the center, if you will, and then you have 1 spot for the residential and then 3 for the retail. And again, if the board felt that 14-inch sign for a retailer was too tall, and we wanted something. When I say the space, not the text, it was too tall because they're only going to have 10-inch lettering. We want to shrink that down. We're open for discussion or however you want to handle it.
Yeah,
I think it's important. You know, I disagree somewhat in the signage of itself because you don't know who the tenants are. And you do rely on certain tenants rely on pass-by traffic. And there are going to be people that see a sign and say, oh, I didn't realize this was here, I'm going to stop in. As opposed to somebody that maybe an established sandwich shop or bagel shop, people are going to know when they go there once, they're going to remember it's there. So you do rely on some pass-by traffic. So that's the importance of having a freestanding sign as well as the facade sign. And then the residential component of just noting if it's the edge of Fairhaven, whatever end up coming up for the units so that visitors know to locate the building. Can we shrink it? Can we get rid of the top cap? I'm here to hear some discussion from the board what their concerns are. If they don't think the name of the center needs to be on top of the sign, it conforms to the ordinance, but I'm here, I understand it's a concern.
So there's a lot of things on here that were compromises. This is the one I think that bothered me the most. Not that it's only important what bothered me the most, but I'm raising it that way. It is true that you'll see people that may stop because they've seen your sign, but 99% of the people that are driving by, they're driving by all the time. We just don't have a lot of that type of traffic given the type of road that River is. You have a lot of repeat traffic. I mean, it is by far unscientifically what you've got. I understand the need to sign it for signage for your tenants. I get that. It is just somehow everything else looks really, really good. I still feel like that is, I don't know.
Would you consider a wider sign but shorter? I mean, is it the height? Is it just the sign itself?
Yeah, it's definitely in part the height. I do think that a wider sign and lower would be better. I would feel better knowing that a kid on a bicycle could see over.
Okay.
It is, what's happening with your building is you're moving into the road, and we don't have new buildings by the road. We have some old buildings that are really, really close.
Right.
But people are for the first time going to feel what a walkable downtown feels like with the parking in the back. Because it's generally, look at Krausers across the street.
Right.
That's what we're used to, the Acme. And so I feel like these sorts of obstructions and these sorts of impediments to the view shed, if you will, have a bigger impact longer term. And once you get it, you'll never give it up. There's no question about that. The question always was, to what extent can we figure out a way to deal with it in a way that would be more appealing aesthetically and not provide that negative?
Well, that's why I mentioned, this sign that we have proposed on here right now is 8 foot tall. Well, called 4 feet wide for all intents and purposes, 3'9". Yeah, so I'm saying, would the board feel better if it was 4 foot high, like 6 or 8 feet wide, but I can still get the square footage, if you will, or the number of signs on there for my tenants and my residential, but it's a lower sign. So it more is treated like a monument sign than it would be a freestanding sign.
I'm interested in what some of the other board members think about the sign.
I mean, would it be blended with landscaping so it doesn't feel like it's so?
It all depends on what direction we go with height. I mean, I'm certainly, we're proposing right now to have an 18-inch masonry bottom, which would have landscaping around it. Whether it's seasonal flowers or general landscaping and stuff like that is what we're proposing now. Obviously, if some reason the sign keeps getting lower and that base gets lower, then it takes away from the landscaping. But right now, the proposal suggestion, I don't call it proposal, suggestion would be if you leave that base at 18 inches, so you still can maintain the brick that matches the building, you can still maintain some flowers and stuff around the bottom, you get that decorative, and then the sign above it, instead of being 6.5 feet tall from the base, maybe it's 3 feet or 2.5 feet, whatever the number is. That I don't know what number needs to be to see over a bicycle, but if that is only 4 foot tall to the top, is that something that's more acceptable? Because now it has a landscape base. It's a lower monument, true monument style sign as opposed to a freestanding sign. Is that something that the board wants to discuss? I'm open for suggestions and or ideas.
Sorry.
I just said I like shorter, but make it a little bit wider because there's going to be pedestrians and bikers that, that sign could be a visual watch for them, especially if you have traffic turning in right there off of the road.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think somebody mentioned the one outside the Acme where it's almost like it's on posts where a biker would be able to see underneath the lowest part of the sign frontage, so to speak. Would that be a possibility? Well,
I thought you wanted to try to get away from more traditional pylon signs with that. I think that is concerned. We have steel posts with the sign raised up, which I don't think is permitted in the zone.
No, they're not allowed to exceed 8 feet height of the sign.
Sorry, just thinking of it.
That's all right.
So can I make the suggestion? I've got a couple more comments with regard to this, and I think we can get through it. It is 20 minutes after 10. We haven't yet started with Rich, and we haven't yet heard from any of the members of the public. I think that the sign is important. I think we've talked about the elevation to Cedar. That's critically important. And I think given the amount of projects that you've got, maybe you can help us understand what these things can look like. And maybe we can engage in a little bit more discussion about that when we meet next. We talked about the lighting, freestanding sign lighting, the awnings we talked about. Front facing Cedar we talked about. So you've got a big section on page 12 about the balconies. Did we have all the information that we need to clear all that up?
Correct. I did ask that question to the applicant, and they confirmed that they will comply with the ordinance requirements for the balconies.
The screening we talked about how the parapet or what have you is tied into that. I think that's pretty good. Lenny, we got through all your stuff.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Are there any board members that have any questions on the just the current line of thinking and what we're talking about?
I got two quick questions. One's on roof access.
I'm sorry,
You guys are providing roof access?
just for maintenance.
For maintenance. Yeah. Is it through a stairwell? A stairwell, the door comes out at the top somewhere or not?
I think there's 2 access points.
They didn't like my careful lead on it.
That's how you get off. Not down.
Either way,
You can't fully.
just for.
So it's not labeled on here, so I can understand why you have a comment. There is a closet, if you will, located in there where we would have just a stair going up to the roof itself.
There's a hall closet, you're saying, there's a stairwell up?
There's a closet in the hallway that would contain it. It's got to be marked in here because it doesn't show a ladder or the door. There's a chase, if you look at it in the area here, that's where the ladder would be to get up into the roof type access.
Gotcha, okay. And then my second question was, you guys are showing an enclosed generator room? So
Right.
I guess to some extent you're exhausting it out to somewhere?
Correct.
Right?
Right, that would be exhausted out the side of the building there.
Exhaust outside towards the neighbors on the east.
Correct. In the event of emergency, correct. You know what? Since we're coming back in, let me get you the answer on that, because that might have been directed to the roof.
Okay.
To avoid the neighbor.
Yep, fair enough.
Let me get that answer for you.
Coach.
Is it the only place it can go on that side? Is there a reason it's on the neighbor's side versus the street side?
That's where the mechanical rooms are.
It's inside though. You actually have it in a closed space.
Correct.
Did anyone else have any questions along this line of thing? Mr. Wilson, I think we're going to need more time to finish up. I think we've gotten through a lot. I have taxed your professionals because I've asked you to do this at the end after we got acclimated with your plans. Does the need to go through Rich's checklist at a second meeting?
I'd like to do that now because it's very short. We'll come back with a change and open up to the public.
Is your list short?
Well, what I can speak to is my original letter dated 11/15/21. They revised the drawings to comply for mostly all of them. I can go through each item. Most of them have to do with some of the details that are shown on the plan, you know, as it relates to constructability of some of the site work, more technical aspect, not necessarily a design aspect.
Which I just want to be able to follow along.
So what I did was I drafted a new letter based on their submission that they sent to us. We got it on the 10th. They basically responded to my comments in a letter on how they revised the drawings and how they intend to comply. There are a few things here towards the end of my letter that might need a little additional testimony. For example, stormwater management, things of that nature.
December 21st, right?
Yes.
So if we could go through your list at a high level, and if there's any more information or if, you know, any addition, I would like to defer additional testimony to the next time we meet.
Okay.
But if Mr. Wilson would like to go through what you've got, you know, maybe that'll help us do more setup for next time.
Sure. So basically my letter is 20 comments. The first comment had to do with the accessible parking that they're proposing. It's more of a housekeeping item. we just need to make sure that the borough clerk is aware of those 2 spaces that are added, so we can amend our ordinance at the council level to indicate those in that section 7-39.4, which is accessible parking on private property open to the public. So they mentioned that they're working with the borough clerk to do that.
Rich, just, I'm sorry, Chairman, if I can, just again, I want to try to get as much as I can so we prepare for next time. Because I've never dealt with it before. Is that just your typical, what you're dealing with on the Title 39?
It's really not even Title 39. It's just basically all we need to add in our ordinance, the location.
Okay.
And it usually references a site plan with a revision date of, so then for whatever reason, there's ever an issue, you can go back and say, oh, this is how it was supposed to be designed. This
it's more like a registration with the clerk.
Yes,
Else.
yes.
Okay. Got it.
And then the governing body would then amend that ordinance section
To include the site.
to include that site.
Okay.
Include the site.
Got it. Thank you.
The second question we had talked about, this has to do with the waiver for a landscape architect. So obviously the applicant had requested that waiver. Number 3, as part of the sanitary sewer, they showed a grease trap. I just want to make sure that Two River Water Reclamation Authority is aware of that grease trap and that whatever detail they show on the plan complies. And they had mentioned that they would comply. Item 4 has to do with the traffic signage within the site. They referenced the DOT specification section. I had just pointed out that the wrong section was mentioned. They've already revised that, and the plan reflects that. Item 5, I just wanted to clarify that the curbing within the municipal right-of-way, which is the Cedar Avenue side, has a 6-inch curb face. So they showed that change on the plan. Item 6 has to do with really restoration of the existing streetscape along the frontage. Obviously, they need to close up some of the driveway openings, and we had asked for them to put in all new sidewalk along the frontage, but we need that pattern to match and be consistent with the rest of our streetscape. And I just wanted to make a note that that's a hand trowel type design and not saw cut, and they did make that change on the detail. The curbing along the entire frontage of the site on Cedar Avenue, I recommend full removal and replacement. They agreed to do that. There's 3 existing light fixtures. I had mentioned this earlier on the frontage of River Road as it relates to our streetscape. Those are the decorative light fixtures. I had recommended for those to be retrofitted with an equivalent LED. That's something the borough is doing as we do maintenance along the existing ones anyway. So that would fall right in line with what we're doing, and they agreed to do that. So that's a 70-watt equivalent, and that's shown on the plan. Number 11 has to do with the detectable warning for ADA curb ramps. Just needed to clarify that the color is safety red. That's at the handicap ramps that you see around town, and they have revised the plans to reflect that. Number 12, they had shown bollards in the trash enclosure initially. That is the point of my bollard comment, but obviously understanding that you're going to look at some alternative measures that relates to the parking underneath and along the rear of the building. So that was already addressed earlier during the testimony. The parking stalls, the stalls are not a traditional single stripe. They're showing a double stripe with a loop. I just wanted that dimension. So when it is striped out in the field, they provide the proper radius and the spacing. There is a detail on the plan. I think they're showing, I want to say 18 inches, center to center or something.
The hairpin
like that.
striping.
Yes.
Correct.
The next comment has to do with the borough's active transportation plan. Within that document, specifically on page 41, they had some recommendations for short-term improvements. I had called out 2 of those. In my review letter, the first one being installation of a high visibility crosswalk striping along the edge of the existing decorative crosswalks. Now, obviously recognizing those crosswalks have been damaged as a result of the water main project. Monmouth County will be coming in and paving the road, within the, in the next 12 to 18 months. And water company, we're working out an agreement now to get those restored for those decorative crosswalks. We're simply recommending the applicant install a high visibility white stripe on the edge of each, and it simply provides additional visibility, and they agreed to do that. The next one,
Rich, I'm sorry, both directions across Cedar and River?
That was the intent.
And Mr. Chairman, our plan shows both.
Yeah, it's
across Cedar and across.
And it's minimal in nature.
Not that plan.
Yeah. The next comment, as it relates to the ATP, has to really do with the area across the street in front of the Krausers property. Once again, I had made this recommendation because it was called out, in the ATP. It had to do with delineating this like a curb extension to try to make it look like a bump out within River Road. In some downtowns they show very similar to what we have in a historic district. We've got that, it's called a tire grip, and it kind of channels the lane. It provides a visual effect at the intersections. That's the same concept that the ATP recommends somewhat within this district, specifically calls it out on the north side of River Road. The applicant, I guess they said basically it's not in front of their frontage. So correct me if I'm wrong. Your thought was you really can't do much there because it's not your property. It's not the front of your property. You want to stick to the south side in itself. So once again, I made the recommendation. They came back. Their specific comment was the interim daylighting treatment utilizing paint and flexible bollards for curb extension area shown on the ATP shows this occurring at the curb ramp across the street from the site. It demonstrates the need to change narrow the existing driveway layout of the Krausers food store. This change cannot be made as the applicant does not own that lot. So I don't know if you have any comments to that statement. I read it as it's stated. I don't know if the board has anything else on that.
So which property are we talking about?
This is specific to the Krausers and the existing curb cut for the entrance to their parking area.
Is it borough right of way?
It's county right of way, but it may impact their access to the site and their turning radius. Yes, Krausers.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, on the driveway across the street, obviously within the county right of way, it's not an issue. What happens is the plan calls for narrowing of this driveway, which we don't own the property or the driveway. On how we as the applicant can be compelled to go across your private property and narrow his driveway to achieve what's in the ADP.
So Rich, is the thought process that in order to do it right, that you would start it on their side of the road, extend the sidewalk, and then finish it on the other side so that you've got a completed improvement?
No, this particular comment is really specific to because there's a parking lane on the westbound side. So it creates that treatment and that visual effect. There's no room to do it because there's a travel lane heading east on their side.
It kind of gives you a visual that kind of keep people in place.
It would be consistent with what we have here in this district.
So if it were on their side, they would be able to do it and it would be appropriate.
Correct.
They can't do it on their side because the parking's on the alternative side of the road. And your point is, hey, you could do it over there, provide the improvement. It really ties together. Is your comment that you would if you could? Or is your comment that no thank you?
No thanks. I'm sorry, it's not our property. we can't do that. I mean, I asked Doug, I mean, there's no way legally we could do it. That's
Well,
the county right away.
Well, so that was the reason I gave you two options and said, if you would, if you could, because then perhaps there's a way that we can find out whether or not we can get you the authority to do it.
I'd have to double check with ownership.
Okay, I see that.
Ownership of my company, not the property.
Yeah, no, I understand, but look, so we would be willing to work with you if you don't have that right, but we could talk to the property owners of the county as appropriate to get you that permission. If in fact it would wind up with a better product, and if you were agreeable to doing it, you're gonna be there, you're doing a lot of stuff. You're doing a lot of stuff, period, and I get it. But then we could have that discussion.
Yeah, let me just talk about it deeper.
Okay. Or Rich?
Item 16, page 2. I had made a comment that the Borough Traffic Safety Officer and Fire Official shall review the drawings or the plans, and the applicant stated they're awaiting their review comments. I'm assuming that these were sent to them, or you may have sent those to them. I guess we have to follow up on to see if.
I don't think we did.
We got nothing from that.
Oh, you haven't got it?
No.
All right. So Sandy, if we want to follow up with those two departments, the one is PD, they have a traffic safety officer, and then obviously the fire official. The next comment had to do with traffic impact. We did hear testimony from the applicant's traffic engineer. I had specifically asked for a proposed trip generation, a no build level of service, capacity analysis, site circulation and parking supply, much of which was in their report, but I wanted the board to hear from their engineer. And obviously we did talk about, we spent a lot of time on site circulation and parking supply. You had mentioned you'd supply. And the other items the engineer talked about. So I think that's all I have on that comment regarding the traffic. The next item had to do with the stormwater. Once again, I typically ask for the applicant to provide testimony just so the board and the public can hear what you're proposing. They are proposing some underground recharge. They're also proposing some rain garden / bioretention type elements. These are all things we had discussed as part of the initial design. In fact, I guess the recharge takes the roof water, things of that nature.
Clean water.
And we haven't gotten the final report from Monmouth County, but typically they would comment on any sheet flow or anything that exits into their right of way. So I'm comfortable with that usually, as long as they're handling that. But from a stormwater management standpoint, if you or your design team can just give the board a quick synopsis of what you designed and came up with for this site and how you're handling it.
Yeah, and again, Mr. Chairman, knowing that the board and the public may want some additional details into it, I would defer that. I'll bring my engineer with me next time, make sure he goes into the level of detail so that if Rich has specific engineering questions, he could answer them.
And then two more comments. The 19th comment had to do with the Monmouth County Planning Board. Obviously, the whole topic of this access driveway. That's something we had picked up early on. You guys submitted a waiver request for that. I've also spoken to them, and I know both sides are working through that. So hopefully maybe at the next meeting, you'll have a better status and update on where we are.
Yeah, Rich, just so you know, for the board's working through this access, the county had access for additional information to support the waiver, which and then the plans, we pulled the driveway a little further away from the adjoining property is one of their concerns. And then also some traffic information that Matt provided to the county. So we're just waiting for their decision. According to Mr. Firmanek, he's forwarded to his traffic engineers. We have not heard back yet, but to your point, I'm hoping at the next hearing we have more information on that.
Okay, and then lastly, really just had to do with outside agency approvals, specifically freehold soil, Two Rivers, water reclamation, and then obviously any others. Normally those are handled as conditions anyway, but we just want to make sure that you make those submissions. We're in the process of.
Freehold soil we have submitted, we have not submitted to Two Rivers. Typically we would wait until if there is an approval, just because things may change with the flows, and the borough can't endorse a TWA or anything without some kind of preliminary approval. So, but certainly if it's condition of approval, if it's something that feel more comfortable to make the application before next year, and certainly we can make the application.
TWA is a treatment works approval. That's a DEP thing, just so the board is aware of, you know, as it relates to sanitary sewer. That's all I had. And like I said, the applicant prior to this meeting had made a submission to try to comply to all these comments as best as they can.
So with regard to the access, I think I've noticed that it was tilted towards the west now. That's what they asked you to do. So what happens if somebody's driving west and then wants to turn in and take a left-hand turn across traffic?
It's hard to see where the depressed curve kind of flares out. So there's enough room in there. The issue we mentioned to the county with that is you're making it more restrictive by pushing away from the residential house and knowing that there's parking on the other side of the street. If anybody be stopping, you have cars behind it. So we put the flared end section out to allow them to make that turn into it, but you still have the point, if you will, that they have to navigate around if they're making the left into the site, if they're heading west on River Road. But again, that was something that the county, I don't want to say requested as part of the waiver submission to pull it further away from the residential driveway.
Did you, as part of that, did you have to put a template?
You had to put a template, you had to show a template to make sure that the car, the garbage truck can make that movement. What we had to provide to the county. And it had to do with the distance of the depressed curve next door versus our depressed curve, and the proximity of that distance is what the county was based it off of.
Okay, we're way later than I want to be.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for letting us do that. That way, when we come back, we now know that Brad's come for the stormwater issue, which he might not have done had we not known. So I appreciate you letting that go through so we know what to do next time we come back. I just have a question about whether you're going to be doing this remotely, only because I need to know what to put in our notice if you're going to require staff.
So we've just eaten up all the time that we were going to spend talking about them. I think that we need to talk about that. But what I think that we should do for the moment is, do we have anything calendared for the January reorg business?
Yeah.
Nothing. When is that meeting?
$18.
Really?
18.
Yeah, the 18th.
And what's the next meeting after that? Tentatively 22nd of what?
February.
And we've noticed that meeting for live, the reorg.
The org is noticed as well,
Sent that last year.
because we sent that last year when we did the move back to live.
So Mr. Wolfson, the board's going to talk about it next. But, my view of this is that the worst thing we can do is, go live, go remote, go live. My inclination is to come back here live, consistent with the notice in January. And my inclination was from there to talk to the board members about switching to virtual so that we can get everybody back to a safe place for as long as we need to be. With regard to finishing this up, the question is whether or not we want to try and do it on that date or whether we want to try and do it on a subsequent date. We don't have, any restrictions on the ability to try and do something in between as well. That board won't be constituted for another few weeks. Well, more weeks than I thought, actually, the 18th. What would be your preference? To the extent that the board will meeting live for our reading on the 18th, and then was going to go virtual starting at the subsequent meeting, would you be inclined to carry for the second half of the reorg, or would you come live?
Yeah, I think in light of what has happened and what our marching orders are and the limited things we need to do based on our policy on both of the reports, we should put January 18th, and we could finish. We give you a summary of the changes that we made, just to apply to what's asked. That'll take a few minutes, and then you open it to the public.
Yeah, so we had 35 members of the public that were here tonight that were participating virtually. All those members will get an opportunity to ask questions and make comments, and we'll go through all of that.
Yeah, sure.
And so we do need to wrap up the materials that are open. And that meeting, we're not going to start right away. We're going to have reorg stuff to do at the beginning. And so we can also talk about whether or not we can or want to throw that to digital, because if we do that, we have enough time to change it. Don't we?
Yes. Well, no, if you announce tonight that we're continued for the 18th, that we don't need any further notice, and on the 18th we come. Well, we don't finish, it's a different issue, but I think
So I think what he's saying, if they decide to go virtual on the 18th, our downside is we just have to renotice.
So here's the issue. We've got 30.
Was, I'm sorry, I didn't understand. I thought you were definitely coming in on it.
I think you guys are exactly right. I did say that I wanted to come in, but if you want to also be heard on the 18th, this is suboptimal for the residents, because I don't even know how this thing works. I don't know how to speak to them. I don't know how, but Zoom, we know, because we've done it before. And so, if we have the participation that the attendance would indicate, then being on Zoom would be a lot better. And I'm assuming that on the 18th of January.
If you told us you want to do Zoom on the 18th, we'll notice.
Yeah, well, we need to engage.
Yeah, just decide, and then we'll do whatever you do.
We just need to know by January 7th, right? I mean, not to know,
before
I want to cut it that close.
But publish it.
Yeah. Oh, we got to publish it, right?
Yeah. So why don't we do this? Anybody have an objection to carrying to the January 18th meeting?
Elizabeth has a question.
I just want to tell you, on OWL, residents can talk, they can speak, they can engage with either the board or the applicant. What they can't do is see the documents.
Yes.
But other than that, you can have a conversation.
That takes a
But if we do a regular Zoom, then they can see the documents if we share the screen.
Right.
Right. Well, and we can see them, and there can be engagement. It's just blind right here. It's not, look, in the end, if we had to do that tonight, we were going to work through that. But the question is whether or not we have to on the 18th, and whether or not we should if we have another option.
Right.
But it seems to me that as people feel tonight unsafe to be in the room, we should assume that they will feel equally unsafe on the 18th. I think that's the safest bet. So are there any objections to carrying to the 18th, to the second half of the reorg meeting, to get back to the M&M application?
No.
And Mr. Wilson, I assume that we have a stipulation of extension of time to act with
You have a
regard.
little form, Sandy, for me to sign?
Or it's just a letter.
Or do you want me to send a letter? How do you do it?
I would just ask you for a writing.
Send you can send an email?
Sure.
Sometimes some of the boards have their own form. We'll send you an email.
I think that's what we did last time. I think we just got a copy by an email of a hard letter.
No worries.
Okay, so I'm going to make the motion to carry the M&M application to the January 18th meeting, subject to the stipulation of the extension of time to act, and further subject to board discussion immediately following this with regard to where that meeting will take place.
Second.
Got it. First and second?
Yep.
Okay.
Mrs. Bush? Yes. Mrs. Couch?
Yes.
Mr. Knoll?
Yes.
Mr. Biolo?
Yes.
Mr. Roll?
Yes.
Mr. D'Angelo? Yes. Mr. Leader?
Yes. Okay, Mr. Wilson. We've got a couple of things to do administratively. I assume you and your team are going to sneak out. I would ask that you sneak out quietly and let us hurry up and get to the rest of our stuff.
So one question, am I leaving any exhibits? Can I take it with me?
I think you should take it until we're done.
Okay.
The question I have is the 18th in person and remote, in person or remote.
Reporter, we'll bring it back to you. We're going to tell you tomorrow. Doug will reach out to you and let you know.
Okay.
We're gonna have that discussion now. People are still on owl, they can hear that discussion.
Yeah, do you want me to leave it up?
No, yeah, leave it up,
leave it up.
yeah, leave it up, leave it up. Okay, thank you. Good time.
So, Rich, what I've been thinking about for the last 3 hours is exactly how I'm going to apologize to you. Because when we ended the last meeting, I was very emotional and angry about that application. And I'm very proud of you to be here professionally working with us on this. And I want you to know that this project, you guys have a lot into, a lot of part into, and that's very, very clear to me as we work on it. I was upset about the other application, I still am, but none of that overshadows the hard work that you put into this project and the hard work that you've given to the residents for you. And so I want that to be said, and I wanted that to be said as quickly as I could say it, and I wanted it to be with no one else here. But I thank you for your professionalism to be here and to work so hard with us, and I'm sure very difficult to even look at me. So I appreciate that, and I thank you for it. This is a good project. And you worked super hard on it. And as we flip through it, you know, it's something that I think is going to be okay. I can say it's fabulous, but it's going to be okay.
It was a settlement. Nobody was happy.
Yes, they told us. That's it. I don't even want to go through the rest of it. Anybody have anything else?
Do you want to discuss how we're going to proceed with Zoom or in person?
So yes, we should do that part. I think that. What's that? You still can open to public generally. Oh yeah, we can still open to public generally. I think we should just look the virtual guys. I mean, I just don't. There's really 2 reasons. Okay, first of all, this was torture all day. I tried to get this canceled, but they wouldn't agree to that.
Let's not talk about that.
Anyway, I know there's a lot of people that want to be engaged, and so they're there on OWL. And I think that to the extent that they want to ask questions or they want to participate, it's a lot easier on Zoom. I know that council has used it, but council doesn't engage with the residents in the same way that we do. And if Doug Wolfson wants to interact with them, I think that it will be easier for everybody. There's plenty of time to do it. I don't like to do this because I think people need to know where we're at. But if we just go to virtual, at that meeting in January, the decision can be made as to how long we'll go out virtual. If we're going to shift it in January anyway, then what difference does it make if it's 1 month sooner?
Yeah, we're almost cut and pasting the notice we did before, unless you want to do a shorter duration, you know, until you could go out 6 months. Until otherwise, I think you have to do those re-noticing issues that we did when we first went out to virtual, and you know, the long and lengthy process of those dates, procedure, and then once you're there, if you're going to switch back, it's easy, but I think you need to do the full gamut of it.
So the zoning board never switched back, and the planning board did, and I think we took that lead from council, and it really is important, right? Because even thinking about whether or not we could meet tonight, the fact that council met last night you know, was kind of like right there in my head, like you guys have just been here. I don't, does anybody object to the idea of going virtual in January and then virtual, well, I guess that'll be decided in January, but presumably a decision to stay virtual for a while?
Makes sense.
No objection.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, why not just say you're going to be virtual for 3 meetings and then take it up at the 3rd meeting?
I think the reason it matters to me and the reason I'm leaning into February and March is because if I thought that everybody was going to be like, no, let's just stay live for February and March, I'd be more inclined to tough this out in January so as to not flip flop again for the residents. I think that's the reason why I'm asking it that way.
Well, I don't like flip flopping either. I like to be here.
Yeah.
But if you at least set it for more than 1 meeting so that everybody knows for the next 3 months.
I think that's right. I think if the soft understanding is that we would lean towards, assuming everything is kind of the way it is, that we lean toward going virtual for a while, then I think that makes sense.
And 3 months isn't unbearably long.
No, and like you said, you can show the documents. I mean, residents can see the documents and follow along easier on that than you can do that.
If we had a TV screen over here and we could see that the way that I could see Zoom, there's something about not being able to see it that makes it feel very different.
And it's difficult on the residents too, because unless on this platform, it's focused on that board, it is, even sitting here, you know how hard it is with the document in front of you to visualize what the question is. It's double that when the applicant has not come down. Wants, you know, it takes a lot to download some of these things or make the trip down here. But if it's going to be able to be a shared screen and they can see that, they can clearly participate if it's almost they have the technology to do that.
I also think there's a high likelihood of attorney engagement with regard to applicants that might have questions or comments. And I think that also would be easier and softer on Zoom. Okay. So I will make a motion then to change the meeting on January 18th to a virtual meeting with a new notice to go out that will clarify only as to January, because that meeting in January will be when we adopt the future schedule, and we'll make that call. The planning board for 2022 will make that call. And that will be the end of the motion, but you would need to call.
In a sense, that the January notice is going to be primarily the applicants with our standard notice dovetailing. Okay? We're going to do that because we're not going out further.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Whatever that means.
Sandy and I will cover it like we covered it today.
Yeah. Did we eventually get that notice out?
Yes.
Okay. Good.
I had this vision of you standing on the aircraft carrier sending the jets out, and Sandy was ready with flags. And
can you imagine had we sent that out and then later it was canceled? That would have been a disaster. Anyway, I made some sort of a motion. I need a second.
Second.
Mrs. Bush? Yes. Mrs. Koch?
Yes.
Mr. Knoll?
Yes.
Mr. Piolo?
Yes.
Mr. Rolfe?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Leader?
Yes. So look, so the last issue is reviewing the RFPs. The idea with regard to the RFPs is that there needs to be some level of review and consideration of what's been submitted. The council is reviewing RFPs. The zoning board needs to do that. The traditional way to do that is with some sort of an interview process that's usually done by members of the boards, which would be a non-quorum number, right?
You appointed committee to interview to make recommendations to the board.
Yep. All right, who's going to do
it? Because you all have that kind of time.
I would do it. I'm happy to participate. I wouldn't want to lead it though.
I would participate, but I don't want to lead it.
Yeah. Okay.
That's your maximum number now.
With no leader.
So
your first chore will be to elect a leader.
So the zoning board hasn't met and hasn't had an opportunity to discuss it. My thinking was that if I participated from both sides, there would be continuity. It's not necessary. I like that the four of you are good to participate, and if you guys are okay, I'm sure you'll find yourself a leader. We good with that?
Are we going to invite members of the zoning board to join us?
So it's a matter of, they're all the same people. So, you know, you would just stagger them and deal with them concurrently. We can talk about it. We'll organize it in a way that makes the most sense. If it gets done via Zoom, it's you know, one board and then the other board.
Okay.
All right. So that's the committee. So someone needs to make a motion.
I'll make a motion. A second.
Mr. Bush?
Yes.
Mrs. Koch?
Yes.
Mr. Knoll?
Yes.
Mr. Piolo?
Yes.
Mr. Roll?
Yes.
Mrs. D'Angelo?
Yes.
Mr. Leader?
Yes. All right.
Is there a time frame that has to happen?
We'll talk about it. There's a lot of moving parts to it.
Open to public.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if there are any members of the public haven't
Raise your hand.
sat patiently by for the last
Let's hope I can do that.
3+ hours. There's no one here in person any longer.
There are no hands raised.
How many people are still on? Can you tell?
Dozen, looks like.
It says we're recording.
No, she's asking how many people are left.
Oh, how many people are left? There are 15, and of those 15, we have 2 council members.
Okay. Still no raised hands?
Oh, one raised hand.
Come on.
Bonnie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I just really wanted to say thank you, Chair, and everyone for making this virtual meeting. I'm so happy I'm sitting home in the comfort of my home, safe, and I just want to thank you, and thank you for going forward this way. And I will save any other comments because I know you're exhausted, and I just appreciate the lengthy discussion on this very important topic. So thank you.
Very welcome. Thank you.
That's it.
You did great, Betsy.
I think we should applaud her effort.
I'm not sure how you ended up in that seat. But
You got a future in IT.
All right.
All right, motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Bye.
Everyone have the best of holidays.
Yep. Merry Christmas.
Safe and sound.